Hello, welcome to Roleplay Geeks. I'm Frank.
This is your token hippie, John.
I'm Jim.
And this is Steve-O, a.k.a. the other Steve.
We're Steven.
Steven's not here today. So he's indisposed. We don't know. Anyway, we got a cryptic message. But anyway, we're going to talk today about different length adventures. But before we get into that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Please rate and review the podcast. We've noticed a nice uptick here lately. And thank you to everyone that's been listening. If this is your first time, welcome. We appreciate that. But whenever you rate and review the podcast, it helps others find the show. So that's just the way those algorithms and things like that work. You can always reach out to us at Roleplay Geeks. What is it? Roleplay Geeks at roleplaygeeks.com? Or what is it?
Sure.
Jimmy?
What? Roleplay.
What's the email address?
Big Dummies.
It's let me look at my phone. It's roleplaygeeks at roleplaygeeks.com. I'm pretty sure.
And we have social media. Look for Roleplay Geeks on Twitter and Facebook and those social things.
Instagram. Don't forget Instagram.
Oh, Instagram. Okay, see? There. I don't do the social thing. So you can't get mad at me if you read something on there that you don't agree with. Get mad at Stephen Mara. He's not here today.
Yeah, basically, yeah. There's only two social people here. The rest, everyone else is antisocial.
Well, I do the Instagram stuff.
All right, so let's get started. Today, what we're going to be talking about is our topic is the length of an adventure. We're going to be talking about one-shots versus adventures or modules versus campaigns and what all that means. So, first of all, let's get into it. Let's define all that. Let's talk about one-shots. Frank, what's your thought on that?
One-shots. Okay, so to my mind, that's just like a one evening, a hit it and quit it. You know, you sit down and you play for a few hours one night, and then you never really do anything with that again. And, you know, I guess in theory, it could be the same characters that you've been playing in another context, but a lot of times, I guess for some reason in my mind, it's characters you make and then play, and then they don't exist anymore. I don't know why. That's probably not fair. Yeah.
John, do you agree with that? Is that we all in agreement? Is that pretty much a one shot?
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I see it usually.
Pretty much a one sitting, right?
Right. Yeah, just get it done in an evening, and you're kind of done with the characters and done with the scenario. So I don't know. I mean, I could see maybe you could always take it somewhere else if you really enjoyed it. So that's the only problem with it, I think. But yeah.
So there's this really cool game, I cannot remember the name of, but it's one where apparently your characters die from the get-go, and it's relatively new.
For some reason, I don't feel like that's a really cool game, but go for it.
No, and the thing is...
It sounds like every game.
Right, but your character, it's going to die from the get-go, and it can be like... So they're kind of a one-shot game, so it's just sort of I want to say it has something to do with zombies, I don't know. But anyway, the point is that you're going to die, this sort of... Knowing that you play your character, with that in mind, and I always thought that'd be cool for a one shot.
Yeah, sort of like what is that game? I think you played a lot. Some kind of computer game where it's 7 days to die, or what is that? It?
That's the name of the game, but you don't actually have to die in that game. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm thinking of like maybe.
You suck.
What's the Left 4 Dead or something like that where you do a holdout? You're never going to make it, but you just try to see how long you make it. So. Yeah, I don't know.
The only problem with that is I know that some of my friends would be like, well, fuck it. They would just put themselves in harm's way just to go ahead and die early just because of it. Haha, it'd be funny. So it'd be one of those things that they wouldn't actually try to survive. And they're like, oh, let's see if I can make this an interesting, funny death.
Yeah. Well, yeah, or, if you wanted to try and achieve some type of objective, I guess. I don't, say, hey, this is it. But I know for me, I don't know if I would be into that or not. But hey, I'll give it a try one night.
I'd have a goal right out of the gate. I would have like, all right, I'm gonna die, but I need to get 3 items first. I need a pig, a car battery, and a bucket of water, and I would orchestrate my death.
All right, I'm not quite sure where to go with that. So.
Yeah, I think I derailed the conversation a bit there. Sorry.
All right, so
Good job.
the next, I guess, the next category we're going to be discussing is basically adventures or modules, or what I'm assuming to be something greater length than a one shot, which may be a one nighter, and versus campaign. So, Jimmy, what's that mean to you whenever we talk about just an adventure? So,
Well, actually, I looked it up on the official site, which was somebody's random.
So you got no opinion of your own
on Reddit.
You had to go look at official interwebs.
so what?
yeah,
let me
yeah,
get this
nerd.
straight. There's somebody out there. There's some kind of panel that makes
Yeah.
an official. This is an
International
official
body.
Yeah.
Yeah. His name's Doug. You can find him on Reddit. Third page, 7 entry down. And he says an adventure is either a published or otherwise written collection of plot, character, and location details used by a game master to manage the plot or story in a role-playing game. Each adventure is based on a particular gaming genre and is normally designed to use within a specific game or gaming system. However, skilled game masters can often convert an adventure to different game systems, and many adventures are designed with such conversions in mind. Essentially, it's a module or an adventure that has a beginning, middle, and end, and then you're done.
So I just, all deference to Doug, you're an idiot. Okay, first of all, it doesn't have to be published. I mean, I've never published a module in my life, but I've run adventures. So the published part is
no.
dumb.
He says either published or otherwise written collection of.
I hardly write them either. I make them up as I go sometimes.
Okay. Or by the
you got
seat of the
some-
pants.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I think that the notion of this collection of organized, that's how Doug does it, and that's fine. Doug, do Doug, but I don't think that's a universal definition by the official international body of adventure defining stuff.
So, then our third category, I guess, that we're going to compare this to is campaigns. So what's that mean for you guys? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
A group
What's
of
a
adventures.
campaign?
A bunch of
It is-
adventures.
I think it's a mythical beast that I've never actually experienced.
I changed my answer
only-
to Frank's.
I've only heard about in whispers around campfires.
Okay. All right.
We've kind of done a few like that and stuff where you just kind of keep these characters going on and on.
Traveler
And
Right.
on.
with Steve's game. Yeah. For many years, John and I have the same two characters.
Again, I'm gonna have to take different character that goes on and on because all the other ones eventually die, right? If it's in Traveler,
Well, my
John's
character's still
never
alive.
died, ever.
Yeah.
that's why I said John. The character,
Well, my second character lived.
second character.
Yeah, but the first character died in the first adventure. So, and then after that, there were many adventures, and he's still alive somewhere. He's not even on the prison planet. He's still out there somewhere, drinking in
Yeah.
a bar or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. So, I mean, how much experience do you guys have with that? I mean, like, with the one shot.
Wait a minute. Let's go back. What did you mean when you said we could say that? Did you do something about character when I wasn't looking?
I don't know. You'll have to
From what
find
I
out.
remember of your character, he's probably in the prison planet too. Unrelated charges.
They call him the Gimp, and they keep him locked up in a wicker box in a room.
Well, wake him up. All right. So when we talk about one shots, and we've already pretty well defined that, that's kind of like the idea is a one night adventure, or maybe an adventure over a couple nights that you do not plan to continue that. One thing I was thinking about in that case, at least the ones I've seen, is typically the characters are already pre-created. And we don't have Steven here to ask about that, who seems to be the most vested in creating his unique characters and everything. But how do you guys feel about that? I mean, typically a one-shot, you don't have the time to sit down, do the character generation, and then say, here we go. I mean, typically you're handed characters and say, these are your characters, choose which one you like between you, and here's the adventure. I know that Chaosium For instance, they have their quick start rule sets for Call of Cthulhu and also RuneQuest. Modifius has it for some of their games where you can try it out. You can typically go to their webpage and download a very minimalist set of rules, but one thing that's never included is character creation. So they always hand you a set of characters to do the one shot or the very short adventure to say, hey, I kind of like this game, or no, I don't. Whatever. What do you guys think about that? How important is character creation in creating your character, or to play an adventure like that?
So this would be very odd considering what I've said in past podcasts about like my backgrounds and my thought about characters and stuff like that. But I absolutely hate being handed a character. I want to create my character, even if it doesn't have a lot of depth. I want it's part of the bonding process for me. The rolling of the dice, or the, making decisions. Oh, should I put more here? Well, I'm kind of thinking I would like to make a character like this. I mean, I hate when you get a character and you've got something in your head. They're like, oh, I think I like to play a character that's kind of like this. But it's sort of, contrary to what the character you get handed would do. So now you've got to figure out how to play that character. And I really, really hate it, but I don't actually have a good reason for it, to be honest with you. Having said all that, I think that I'm unfairly hated.
What about you guys? Jimmy?
Well, first of all, I think there's two categories I would put one shots. Like a large game system like Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu, where you're doing one of those in an evening. In those cases, I think it's probably necessary to hand out a character. But there's a lot of one-shots, like All Out of Bubblegum or The Witch is Dead. Those are pretty popular ones. Everybody is John. We've played that one. And in those cases, you really don't need a character.
You mean everybody's a murder hobo?
Well, could be. That's a great game. That is a really brilliant game because everybody plays one character with multiple personality disorder. And what happens? You set everybody up in a circle, right? And you're the first guy has control over John, and then if he goes to sleep or some event triggers his switch in personalities, then it goes to the next person to control him. And it happens pretty frequently. And every personality inside of John has a goal they're trying to achieve. And you want to achieve it, and the other people have different goals, and you don't want them to achieve their goals. And whoever achieves their goals first wins, and that's the end of the game. It's pretty brilliant. It's absolutely hysterical. A good time. But you really don't have a lot of stats, or none at all. It's just role-playing by the seat of your pants. That's sort of like All Out of Bubblegum. You remember that? You remember that movie, They Live, with the wrestler from back in the day? Well, that's where they got it from, All Out of Bubblegum. You have one stat. It's bubblegum. So it's either the thing you're going to do is bubblegum or it's not bubblegum. So you have this one overarching attribute that controls the game, and then everything else is not bubblegum. And I think you get like an 8, and it can go up and down throughout the game. That fluctuates based on what you're doing and what you have done. But there's a lot of games like that, those micro RPGs, that you don't even need a character background or anything to create, all the stats and skills and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. I get that. But what's your thoughts on, let's say, a one-shot game in Dungeons and Dragons Traveler, a more traditional role-playing game? I mean, do you like? I mean, you sit down. We're all going to say, "Hey, we're gonna do this adventure." Competition modules are often like that.
I love it. It's a challenge, man. You're handing me basically an actor or a character to play as an actor, and then I take that and look at what's on the page, and then I can fill in the gaps and fill in whatever I want on top of that. Like you gave me Troy, this kid who in Call of Cthulhu, because my character had to get fitted for a colostomy bag, and my Troy character, you gave him to me, and he's like this early 20, late teen.
You probably need an
kid
extra large.
Who was a local, and they were out looking for the girl, I guess, that was lost in the woods. But anyway, that's the character you gave me, and then I just filled in a bunch of things and added to it right off the bat to fill him out and make him a little bit more interesting.
And I know that we often talk about how Stephen Mara, or I should just say Stephen, is just very, involved in his character backstories. But I would say you run a close second to that, because you almost always immediately have, you started throwing in, oh yeah, my friend Smooch and I, we come up here to the lake on a dare, and after just me giving you one or two minor details, next thing I know, by the end of the night, you had his whole character fleshed out and created. So I have to admit, for me, I'm like Frank. I hate like Traveler Adventures. Always have the old school, the classical Traveler always had these adventures, and they would always have the characters pre-generated that you could use, and just to be handed this character, I don't have any feeling for it. I'm just like, okay, I've got a shotgun. Why don't I have a shotgun? Okay, and you got all your items and all the stuff, and I have a hard time connecting with it. It takes me a few sessions to fill my character out. What about you, John? Or go ahead, Frank.
I kind of think maybe that's a difference in between Jimmy and I in role, if you will, pardon the pun, in like storytelling. So Jimmy likes the actor role a lot. So for him, it's I don't have to think about any of this stuff. I need to think about how to give this character life. Whereas I think more like I guess a director or a screenwriter. Like, okay, what kind of character do I want to make? What do I want this person to be, and how do I want them, what their function is in the story, that kind of way of thinking. So the life part is, part of it's because I'm not a very good actor, so I don't excel at that. So that other part I do enjoy more, and I think the character creation lends itself more to that than it does to the how you give it life part.
Mm-hmm. So, any thoughts on that, John? The character creation, one shot. Can you connect with that? How do you feel about?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I kind of like it similar to Jimmy and stuff. I kind of like the idea of getting something, just a kind of a semi-blank slate, and getting to go somewhere with it, inject it with something of my own. I think it'd be kind of fun. I don't really have an issue of being just handed one. Here you go. Because the thing is, if it came down to it, a lot of my characters would be very similar. They'd be this amalgam of my preferred skills and hopes and dreams or whatever you want to go with and stuff. But if I was handed something, I think it'd be a lot more fun just to inject it with. I mean, like what Jimmy does, I think is a better way to put it is not so much him, kind of getting deep and philosophical like Steven does. He's more like, okay, what is something really weird and funny and bizarre that I can do that's just going to be like, so that everyone's going, what the hell is wrong with you? So, because that's what usually happens. It's like, what?
I love characters with flaws.
All right, fine, whatever.
I just love them.
You've got cowboy boots and clown shoes and clown outfit on or whatever. It's bizarre stuff.
Yeah, so, and from a game master's point of view, as Frank has pointed out, and I wish Stephen was on here today, because but I'm assuming he'll hear this eventually. Stephen will create things in his character that nobody knows but him. So he's got this real mysterious, motivations that we're all like, why are you doing that? He'll just suddenly reveal it out of the blue, not even tell the game master this is his past or whatever, which is can be a challenge. But
yeah, well, that is one difference between Jamie and Stephen is Jamie will wear his on his sleeve. Everyone knows exactly what's going on and stuff.
I love physical traits, like really weird, like playing a dwarf that got raised by some Aboriginal type tribe, that uses their rings to make their necks really long. So he's like 5.5 feet tall, maybe 6 feet tall, but most of that's neck. Like, I like those really weird characters. A guy with one leg, that's fun to play. A lot of people look at that and say, I want my character to be perfect like a Superman. I don't. I want a guy who has one leg and then has to, get a potted plant or something and attach it to the leg so that he can hobble along.
So we're veering off subjects a little bit. Go ahead, Frank. That's fine.
Whereas I kind of like internal conflicts that not necessarily manifest. Like I don't have a problem with like a normal human or whatever, but I like a character that appears. So the character I'm playing in Traveler Drink right now in Jimmy's campaign is, I mean, he appears. He's got a high social status, and he appears very, part of society, and he's presented himself as a very professional, but he's also a little psychotic because of things that have happened to him, and that busts out at weird times.
We noticed.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. That's an interesting character to play, even though the physical bit is irrelevant. So this is kind of interesting.
So flipping that around as game master, you guys have any thoughts as far as running one shots? What are your thoughts on putting one together, trying to keep it together, trying to keep it one night, try to bring it to a conclusion, that sort of thing? Any challenges there? Or what are your thoughts? Any thoughts?
I got to be honest. I don't like running one shots that much because I get bogged down by the rules. So one shots sometimes turn into 4 shots because it just takes, like it turns out a battle takes 8 hours, that you thought were going to take like 10 minutes to do or whatever, or encounter. And on the second part of that is that I like to build connection and a little bit of layer of story, and one shots are difficult to do that. So I kind of feel like so short stories are not something I necessarily gravitate to as a storyteller or a reader, because I feel like there's not enough space to make the depth that I'm looking for. So I don't like one shots that much, and I don't do them as a whole. And sometimes though they're necessary, like if you have in like today's podcast, we have somebody who normally plays isn't there. Well, let's maybe do a one shot, but even then I'm just like, let's play a board game instead.
Yeah.
I like
Jimmy.
I like them for certain things, like introducing new players to a game. I love them for that, particularly Dungeons and Dragons, because then you can ease them into the rules and into what the game's all about. And you have a really, really short adventure. Usually I do the same one. It's a farm town where you have a couple kids go missing or something important go missing. I switch it up sometimes. And it's, a bunch of undead
A couple
creatures.
sheep go missing.
Yeah. a couple sheep go missing.
We're not going to talk about that adventure. We agreed never to talk about that adventure.
And then, they have to go find the crypt where they're being held and then save them. And it depends on how dark I feel that day, whether or not they've already been eaten or, devoured or whatever, and or whether they get in there and save them. The younger kids, you always let them win and save and that kind of stuff. But unless they're dark like my kids.
Yeah. But now, on the other hand, though, do you look at that more as an introductory adventure that could be a continuation to an adventure, larger campaign, or is it always just a one? I mean, to me, one shot.
It's almost always a one shot.
It's over.
Yeah, it's pretty much always a one shot. It's just they'll never play that character again. I don't know that I've ever played the character again in those cases. And then the other case is I'm okay with doing a one shot in an evening if somebody doesn't show up for the game. Like the Everybody is John, I love that one. We did another one with a zombie thing we didn't actually get to finish. I loved that one. That was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of others I'd like to try. The Witch is Dead sounds really interesting. I'd like to give that a go.
The zombie one, I can't remember what rules it was, but there was basically, like you had very little stats, like 1 or 2 stats, and it was something I think, Steve-O, that you would not like because you've expressed you didn't enjoy this when you did something like this earlier, which is you play yourself. And so essentially you start the game, and you have what you literally have on you. So it was kind of neat in a way, but it
took place in the town we grew up in, and so everything was familiar. So when we're talking about places, you didn't have to spend that extra time to describe, the mall or to describe Bulltail Hollow Road. Everybody knew where it was. They'd driven it 100 times. They knew what all the roads were. So you just talk, and it was real quick. So the setting was already taken care of. Everybody was operating with the same setting. So it was a hoot.
Well, I remember we had, years ago, I had a game master who was obsessed with doing these. Just like that, we played ourselves. And for instance, we did a Call of Cthulhu campaign, and and then we also did a post-apocalyptic, which in a way was maybe a little more fun because everything was blown up. So we would say, hey, let's go down to the National Guard Armory. And you're right, you already know the setting. But the one that was Call of Cthulhu, where it exists in your real world today, and I'm a college student at the time, and I have certain things, certain assets like my car and all these kind of things like that. And then you find yourself doing all this like retrospective things, like almost like a psychoanalysis of like, would I make that decision? Or, I don't know. It's just it's not that it can't be fun. It just can be kind of bizarre. I don't know.
It is.
But anyway, we're veering way off the subject here. So so let's look at I guess a module. And when I say module, for some reason I always feel like that's a published module. So I don't want to use that word. I want to use just adventure, like maybe a series of evenings.
Yeah, Doug.
and then we still need to look at campaign. I mean, what's your all's thoughts on that? Like, I mean, how do you define that, an adventure as opposed to, let's say, a campaign? I think we got one shot pretty well figured out. You got one night, you're going to play a game, and you're not going to come back to it most likely. But so, what do you guys look at it as adventure versus campaign?
For me, adventure is just called gaming because that's like all we do. 95% of what we do is just an adventure. You make a character and you go through a story of some sort, maybe a second story of some sort, and that's that. And then that character...
That's when it becomes a campaign.
Well, I mean...
When you get your second story added on.
Yeah, that's basic. But maybe you get a second story, but then then the characters just kind of go away, and you don't think about them anymore. And then you make another character and do a different story, and that's just sort of how we do things now.
Well, actually, I think it's more along the lines of what happens is like, man, I'm tired of GMing. How about Jimmy doing it? And then we go to another game system, another set of characters, etc. And if we ever get back to the old ones, then we're continuing the campaign. But otherwise, it's like that was an adventure.
Yeah, for sure. And I know for me, I guess what I was doing for a number of years, because I live geographically so far from you guys, and we've only been really gaming a lot because we're using Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds now. But in a way, I would write a lot of one-shots because I never really thought of them as one-shots, more or less adventures, but I would have an idea, and then all you guys live in 3.5 hours away from me. So the past 20 years or so or more, I would get an idea and I would call you guys and say, hey, can we get together this weekend? I've got an adventure. And I would run you guys through it. And typically it would be something brand new. And after that weekend, whether we concluded it or not, we were done. So sometimes I would have you guys pre-generate characters ahead of time, but say these are the kind of characters you need to be. But often I would create the characters too, just to save time, because character generation is typically a whole night by the time you get to the end of it.
Particularly in travel.
So yeah. I mean, it takes quite a long time. So I know for me, I always think of an adventure. Let's look at I know when I was gaming, my first few years of gaming, I gamed with a guy that brought up the idea, because the way we had always playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, but we played a lot of different games then, and we would switch it up every couple of months and play Mario Project or something new that had just came out. And sometimes we would come back, but in particular our Dungeons and Dragons adventure, I would look at the campaign as being you go out tonight and we all game and we go in this cave or dungeon or whatever. Maybe it'll take us a couple nights to get through it. And then after we're done with that, we go to town and sell our loot and do all that stuff. And then maybe another game master would take over or whatever. That to me was a campaign. That was like, you just kept, in the Dungeons and Dragons, I think is particularly geared toward that, because you're always continually improving your character as you play, and you're leveling up. And one time I was playing with this guy, and we'd played together some, and he said, I like to write book-length adventures where there's a defined beginning, middle, and end. And after I thought of that, and that really changed everything for me. as far as designing my adventures. That not to put things on rails, but to try and think of it like, and that's also where my adventures maybe perhaps got a little more deadly, because you may not survive, but that's okay, because this will end, and maybe your character didn't make it through. Maybe yours is the one that wanted to buy the farm and get married to a sweetheart after the end of the war, that always dies in war movies. But anyway, and so now when I think of a campaign, me particularly, is the way my Call of Cthulhu adventure and campaign, which we hope to continue, in fact started working on a little bit, and is that we had this one situation where there was a beginning, middle, and end. That was the adventure, but it took several nights to get through it and get everything felt out. But then when we continue, it's going to be several months in the future, and there's going to be some events that happen. Just so I look at it now as my campaigns are books, essentially like a series of books or a series of stories, where here's that adventure these characters did, and then we're going to move to book 2, and I want to try and have some connecting story arcs within that. So instead of just one adventure after another that are not connected.
I kind of feel like adventures are almost defined by not campaigns and not one shots. Like we can define the campaign pretty well, and we can define a one shot pretty well, and whatever's left over, that's what an adventure is.
Right. Well, to me, I think that an adventure to me is something that you create characters you want to keep, and maybe with the thoughts of bringing it back, or something that definitely is going to take more than 1 or 2 sessions to resolve. That you plan to really sink your teeth into this thing and figure it out. Whereas to me, a one shot is almost a throwaway thing. It's like something to do to kill time, and you're done. And then tomorrow we're going to play something completely different.
So, Jimmy, do you ever create characters with the thought of a campaign?
I used to, and then I died all the time. So,
well, it's just, the characters you make have a lot of personality and, like you said, physical defining characteristics and all stuff like that. And it kind of feels like you're like, oh, this is what I'm in the mood for right now. And I'll play that for a little bit, and then he'll go away, and then I'll do something different.
With Traveler, I have a bunch of different characters that I keep, and they're on planets, and they own shops, and the shops are well defined, so that I can just pull them out. So you guys may run into the same shop owner on a planet.
Well, I'm not talking about as a GM. I'm talking about your characters as a player.
I just die too much. I just know he's going to die, so I just create a character, hope he's going to live. I expect he'll live. So I create him expecting he'll live. I'm always a little disappointed when they die. But as soon as they're dead, I'm ready to get to the next character, slip into the new role. That's fun, too. I don't know if that answered your question.
Kind of. I realized while Steve was talking and during this podcast that I actually make my characters with the thought of campaign, like inadvertently. I think in terms of, okay, how am I going to enjoy this character for the next 3 years when I've never played a character for 3 years since I was a teenager? So it's kind of a little silly that I don't think about a character in terms of he has an arc that goes from this point to that point. And it's always a he. There's no reason if I'm just doing like a one shot or an adventure that, is like you said, a novel, couldn't play a woman. That'd be different, kind of interesting. It's just, I think about it. Is this a character that I want to be embodied for the next many sessions, which is odd because we just don't play that way anymore.
Mm-hmm. What about you, John? We haven't heard. What's your thoughts on a character when you create it? For instance, Jimmy's Traveler adventure that we're in right now. Do you look at that character as some guy you're going to play for the next 3 or 4 years, or do you think of it more of in different terms?
Kind of like what I was saying earlier. Actually, was I feel they're more adventure characters, not kind of anything epic or anything, or long term, because like I was kind of joking about, but at series is what usually happens is we play for a while, and someone gets tired of GMing and we've maybe played, 3 or 4 sessions, and then we're like, man, I'm kind of done. I don't have any more, ideas for this world or whatever. What you guys are doing and stuff. Does anybody else want to GM tonight?
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to a completely different system. Like we go from Traveler Drink to D&D or whatever, and we switch over, and then we create new characters and we go on a whole new spiel. So I've gotten previously, I would have done it when we were gaming with you a lot. We would kind of carry our characters on for quite a while, for months or even years. But now we're doing this, kind of shorter 3-4 adventure, or at least 3 or 4 nights or whatever when we get together and play. And then it's like, okay, I don't have any more. We go in the next one. So I don't kind of, do these kind of epic length, characters and stuff. Not that I create the character differently, or do anything differently, because you never know what's going to happen with it. But I don't really worry so much about it or anything else. I create it for what I feel like that for that night, and then hopefully kind of carry on with what I remember of how I felt about the character and what I wanted to accomplish with the character, and keep it going for however long we play. So that's it.
So let me throw another question out there. So whenever you game masters are creating your adventure, how do you typically, what's your thought process? Do you think this is a cool story that we're going to do over a few nights, or do you think in the campaign sense, or do you think a different way altogether? What about you, Frank?
I never think about a campaign because I don't think I'm smart enough. It's the short of it. I mean, I have an idea, and the ideas that I have are actually not that in depth, really. Wouldn't it be cool if blah, blah, blah? And then I start generating a set of scenarios that would conform to that idea, that notion. And it could be real simple. So, for example, I did a campaign years ago, a D&D a D&D adventure years ago, where the idea was, what if the orcs weren't evil? They were just a different race, right? And there's this great war, the perception of war between humans and orcs. I know it's somewhat stolen from World of Warcraft, sure, but that was the general notion and the idea. And there was a bit of intrigue around it. It had to do with a prince and the 2 princes, and the father died, and it was a whole thing. And I wrote an adventure around that, but that was the gem of the notion. And then the next thing, where I tried to turn it into a campaign, which turned into a colossal failure, which was, what if you were on a riverboat, like, Huck Finn type of thing.
Inside joke, but
right.
We'll just leave it at that.
But I mean, and that was the idea. Is what if you were built around the Mississippi? What if you had an adventure that was around traveling up and down the Mississippi? And I thought, well, that would be kind of interesting. And I tried to continue those characters on in that context, and it failed terribly. But again, the gem of the idea isn't really lend itself to a campaign. There's nothing that connects the notion that what if orcs and humans aren't, good, evil. They're just different races with different goals, with what if you had an adventure on a big river like the Mississippi. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. It's just, let's create a story around that general notion.
And bring the characters from our last adventure into that.
Well, I tried then, but I mean, since then I've kind of given up on that. Let's just have a set of characters. Let's have a notion. Let's have a story. And then the one that I'm in the middle of running, which we haven't run in 2 months, that doesn't have anything after it's over. It has nothing. So once those characters are done with that adventure, to my mind, it's done. If I have another idea, great. But if not, I kind of feel like, what they say about movies. Like you wrote a movie. Will you do a sequel to the movie? I don't know. If something presents itself that's interesting, but we're kind of done with that movie.
That's kind of how I write my adventures as well. What about you, Jimmy? Whenever you're creating your adventure or your idea for an adventure, do you think of it continuing on beyond the story? Beyond the immediate story that you came up with?
No, I don't think so. I have a specific story I want to tell And that's where I leave it. So, for example, I think a lot of people pretty familiar with Ravenloft in D&D. So that's a campaign setting. There's one primary quest, and that deals with overthrowing Strahd, the main villain.
Spoiler alert, man.
Yeah, if you don't know that by now, I'm sorry. Not much.
I didn't know
but
that.
A little.
I didn't know that either.
Well, anyway, it's you know it almost from like 2 seconds into the campaign, so I'm not spoiling anything. But then you have a lot of adventures inside of that. Some of them are related to the overarching adventure, the primary quest, and then some of them are not. And so that's sort of how I operate. I have that overarching quest, and then I have a lot of other side quests that can or cannot be intertwined and necessary to the main adventure. And I think about it that way.
Do you do it? And when you throw those side quests in there, are those usually just off the cuff, or are those things you've pre-planned? Or
I've laid out conditions and the status of the backgrounds of the characters and different things that I've given them over the period of time. And then if they pull on a thread, that might activate certain actions happening in the world that will take them off in that direction. But I don't plan out a full-on adventure. It's almost like flying by the seat of your pants within a structure. And that's how I do everything.
You know, kind of interesting, though, your adventures, your Traveler at least, feel like it's all the same universe in such a way that they feel like it is a big campaign. Because like you did one years ago where you go through the Travelers through these gates.
Yeah.
And there was a ship that went through and then came back out or something. I can't remember exactly. I don't remember all the details. I remember it had to do with like the atomic weight of helium was slightly different was the resolution or whatever.
It is the same universe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
and
big
then,
universe is the same.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the thing. So in some ways it does feel a little bit like a campaign in a way. It's just all new characters. So it has that kind of feel, but I mean, not really.
It's like in Dungeons and Dragons playing Forgotten Realms. So the settings are all the same, but maybe the adventures and time periods might be a little different.
So do you guys think, what are your thoughts on, we've already kind of touched on different game systems such as some of the ones you mentioned that are maybe, oh great, somebody's mowing the yard across the street. But anyway, you guys have already had mentioned that there's certain game systems you think lend themselves better to one-shots, but on the same token, are there other game systems that are better for those book-length adventures that I think we've kind of defined, and others that maybe lend themselves better to a campaign, continuing campaign, where you want to keep your characters and want to keep the ball rolling? What's your thoughts on those? Different game systems.
Okay, Dungeons and Dragons, I think, is obviously designed for campaign lengths. I mean, you've got 20 levels of character growth, and the growth reduces dramatically as you get further along. It's harder; you have to do a lot more to get there. And I've been really in the mood to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I've been kind of disappointed with our playing of Dungeons and Dragons. And no slight on Andrew at all, that's not what I was meant, but the reason is because I wanted to play a long campaign where I had a character that started at level 1 and worked at level 20. I was like really kind of longing for that because I think that system so lends itself to that. And instead, what the premise of our adventure with Andrew was, let's learn how to use this technology and use it for the podcast. So I just made kind of a throwaway character in my head, and then when that was done, we were like, okay, do you want to continue doing that? And it was like, oh yeah, I do, but I didn't plan for like a campaign level thing, and so it's been a little bit of a challenge for me as a character. But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, I think, lends itself to that campaign length more than I would say almost any other system I've ever played. But Call of Cthulhu, however, lends itself really well to the adventure, at least my experience thus far. I can see where you have a campaign in it long term, but honestly, I don't know that it's necessary, that you kind of have everything out of the gate.
Well, there's even the aspect of Call of Cthulhu where your sanity is an issue. So there's and it's so easy to die in it is the other aspect.
You
So
don't
it's really
say.
kind of easy to have a completely broken
You haven't
character
died
by
in
the
it.
end of the
That's
night.
true. I haven't died yet.
Admittedly, I haven't died in it, but I'm just saying it's fairly easy for characters to die. And the sanity issue can just break a character.
Keep in mind that the sanity is because you are actually seeing reality. It's other people's perception of your sanity.
Well, yeah.
Whenever you start, rambling at the grocery store saying, there's gods under the sea, they're coming to get us, you have no idea. You're actually becoming more sane in a sense, right?
Right.
Well, and I made my character for Call of Cthulhu. I have with an adventure in mind, to be honest with you. Like, I didn't think about him as a longer term. Now, I made him in such a way that he can. It's not impossible to make that leap, but that I did make him with that sort of, this is an adventure, distinct character, and move on.
Well, and then that brings up again, which we touched on this, and this podcast is really not supposed to be about character creation, but I did pre-generate all your all's characters for that because I had a specific beginning in that. And what was your thoughts on that? Because we certainly, all of us, could have sat down and spent an evening creating brand new characters. But what were your thoughts on the fact that I created these characters to fit into the beginning of this story? What was your thoughts on that? Did you feel like you missed out on anything, or?
I liked it actually. I thought it was really kind of fun to play it because it's not a character I probably would have normally made. And so it was kind of fun and trying to explore the character and his rationale for certain things that he's that I would do with him. And so I'm playing the character differently than I've played before. So not vastly. So there's aspects of him that's very similar to other characters that I play, but there are things that I've done differently and how I've role played differently because it's a character that was handed to me, not one that I created myself.
Well, look, and I did try to help you. I tried to kind of give you some background, but then also leave it open for us to develop that character together before we all got together as a group. I wanted to leave a few things open. Like I think you rolled up a risk taker, and somehow we decided to come up together that you like to do motorcycle racing and things
Right.
like that. That was your choice,
Right.
to build into your character. Jimmy, you had something?
Oh no, I was swatting at a fruit fly. But I do have a question.
Fruit fly is
I do have a
cute
question
little baby
for
gives
you.
his wife.
Wow, that is like a totally unexpected.
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
So you created my first character, which was fun to play, but a little challenging for me because I'm constantly, while I'm playing this, first of all, none of the other guys know my character's background. They know it now, but at the time I was an FBI agent and I was undercover. So I'm playing this character like that. So I've got to constantly be thinking in my head, I'm an undercover FBI agent. I'm not going to let these guys know who I am, what I'm really doing. I'm undercover. And then things got so bizarre. It's like every step I'm like, what would an FBI agent, like you can understand what an FBI agent would do in a normal situation. Like you're undercover, you go into the biker bar or whatever it is, and you're undercover with those guys, you get in deep, and then there's a trigger point where you say, okay, now it's time to take them down. That's understandable. But then you're in a crypt with undead things shambling about and dead people disappearing, and there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. It's like, what's the rules for this FBI agent, man? I don't know. But my question has nothing to do with that. And it has to do with Troy. So you created him, but did you create Troy? Because you sort of handed him off to me really quick. I think you had him. Did you create him that evening, or did you?
No, yeah, totally
Seat of the pants?
off the cuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, which I guess because occasionally there's a death in my campaigns.
You don't say.
I feel that I've developed a skill to be able to skillfully bring
60%
people
of the
in.
time it works every time.
Yeah. So you know, for instance, I remember we were playing Traveler some years ago, and Jerry, you remember Jerry?
Yeah.
Died or something, and he did something really stupid too, so don't blame me for that one. But anyway, I don't remember how it was, but anyway, so then you guys are exploring some large starship or something that was adrift, is where your characters came in to explore this thing. Well, you know, before long, it's sort of Left 4 Dead 2 style. You know, there's a dude like banging on a compartment, you know, that had been trapped and had all these oxygen bottles and food, and it, you know, had escaped in there, and so that's how you found him, you know. And in the case, so, you know, in the case of Troy, I knew there were other posses in the woods looking for the girl and being held hostage and everything. So it was a simple matter of, and plus your other character needed immediate medical attention. So it was pretty easy. Those guys were bugging out because they were getting scared because of all the weirdness going on the deeper you got into the woods. And then you were close to a road, and I said, okay, these guys are going to show up in a UTV and they're going to take your injured character away, and that guy's going to give up his seat and say he wants to continue. And then you made up the name. I didn't make up the name. I just said it was a guy.
Poor Troy. Because he's an outdoorsman, and you ruined it for him, so he can't fish anymore. He's terrified of water now. Screw you, man.
So, you know, and as a game master, you know, it kind of made me think a little bit like, did you not like and I tried, when I created those characters, I tried to think about your personalities and playing with you guys in the past. And like John, you know, I made you ex-military. You know, you usually, I don't know, at least the adventures that I run kind of take the lead of the exploratory thing and all that. So I thought Private Eye, you know, with ex-military might work real well.
Right.
You know, Frank, you know, created an academic. You know, I don't know that I hit the mark with your character. You know, a guy that's very based in history, is an academic, but also has, you know, some skills with some firearms because he's an antique firearm collector, things like that. You know, trying to make it make sense within the story.
For me, you know, as I said on the podcast in the past, that particular genre is not one that I like a lot as a whole. So when you said, let's play Call of Cthulhu, my immediate reaction was, I'm going to play somebody who doesn't believe in any of this hokum. That's what I wanted to play. And then you handed me somebody so like the history and all that other junk, yeah, whatever. It didn't matter because everything you handed me was perfectly aligned with what I wanted to play anyway. And so the backstory of a, you know, historian and all this other stuff like that, academic, worked well as an explanation why that would be true. But that's the character I wanted to play, is that somebody who's going about in the world. And I wanted to make them somebody who had a connection to the real world and a reason for the world to be right as opposed to weird. And that's why I threw in the thing about the daughter, because it was like, okay, this person has a reason for the world to be good and right and move forward and, you know, a future for their kid. And so all this other weird stuff, I'm not going to believe in it. So it was sort of what I actually forgot you handed us our character, because again, the character that I invented was more or less, you handed me that character anyway. So, you know, it just was a happy accident, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Well, on the other hand, you could have been an academic that was a believer, though. I
could have, but so, I mean, I could have gone a different way, but
I felt like it fit. And again, you know, it was me gaming with you guys all these years. I tried to think about a character that you would like to play that I felt would fit, because we needed, you really need a lot of different skills. I mean, just like any game, you need to have a balanced party, right? Not everybody can do everything. So there was that part of it. And again, I was kind of writing the characters around the story, but at the same time, I know we all had solo sessions, and I wanted to help you guys help me fill out what your background was based on the framework of what your character did for a living. Probably, you know, Steven's not here, but probably he was the most difficult just because of his propensity of creating a very unique background. So, which he did anyway, you know. So, but we've talked about that in the past. So, any other thoughts on this? So we're kind of rolling here on an hour. Any other thoughts on one shots, modules versus campaigns as a game master, as a player?
I for some reason I didn't consider one shots going into this. I was just thinking about adventures versus campaigns, and I'm realizing that I actually would very much like to play a campaign proper. Where I sit down and I haven't done it in years, but I would like to make a character. Properly make a character, because when I used to do campaigns, they were all obviously avatars for me, and so I was reaching for those elements in fiction that I liked, and pretended that I could do those things. And I think it'd be more interesting now as an adult to make a character that I get to embody, that I get to try to make interesting in their own right, but keep around for a long period of time. So I thought going into this podcast, I thought, I really would like to play a campaign, not run. Absolutely do not want to run, but play a campaign. But I also think that campaigns are the hardest for the game master to think about. And I don't know that I would ask anyone to run a campaign for me, because it's a little obnoxious to do that, in my opinion.
Well, I think a lot of it depends on what type of campaign we're talking about. And one thing we really didn't finish out on, but like different game systems as far as, for instance, Traveler, Call of Cthulhu, the games where you start as a whole person, maybe they grow a little stale because you can't really improve your character that much. You can build your wealth, and you can accumulate material things that make you more powerful. For instance, maybe you don't start in Traveler with battle dress, powered armor, or a fusion weapon, but eventually you can do that, or you can acquire alien technology or something like that. But at the same time, there's not a lot of character growth as far as leveling. Again, you're right. Dungeons and Dragons is made for that. And if you just do modules, if you want to call that a campaign, you can just buy modules designed for characters 4th through 7th, characters, 8 through 9, and they usually all continue on if you want to keep that rolling. That would be a campaign. But again, for me, I look at now campaigns as being those adventures, those book-length adventures connecting those characters. So, But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Anybody else like to say? And, I guess we can keep rolling with Andrew, assuming he wants to keep rolling these characters. We can do a campaign with him. It's feeling like a campaign.
Yeah, I think what he's putting us through is Tales from the Yawning Portal, which is a campaign, a D&D campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, my screw up there was I made a character that doesn't lend itself well to my playing ability.
I hear you. I'm playing a monk.
Jimmy would have been a better bard. And it occurred to me just the other day that I was like, I could have set up this character as like the silent type that basically lets his music speak for him.
Mute bard.
No, not mute. That's the thing. Is that
could you please pass the salt?
No, just that somebody who I was thinking of Billy Joel once said that he's not very good at parties, not very good at sports, not very good at he's not very personable to talk to, but he likes when he goes to parties to go to the piano and play because it becomes his voice, essentially. And I thought, I could play a bard kind of like that, and that would lend itself to my acting ability a lot better, which didn't occur to me until, we've been playing, 10 sessions or something like that. So it's like, oh yeah, I could have gone a different route with that. So,
well, I sympathize because, I started out as a paladin and Steven was already playing a paladin. So I'm kind of like, we don't have a cleric and I'm trying to use this paladin as a healer. So, Andrew knew I wasn't maybe having the best fun with his character, so when we had basically a party wipe, which ended up with everyone else being captured, my character died, which I was perfectly fine with because I knew we needed a cleric. But with that being said, I have never, ever desired or wanted to play a cleric. It's just not. I usually like to play fighter type, or I've actually played a bard. In the early days, I had a bard for a long, long time, and
arguably, as long as you spend inside of webbing in the game, you really haven't played a cleric yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. But anyway, I've actually liked my clear. I mean, I know I've been a little critical on a couple other podcasts, just saying I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around the background and some of that. But now, as far as just the regular play, like what we've been doing, our tactical stuff in battles and all that stuff, I'm kind of into it. I've got some pretty powerful spells. I can heal up some hit points. I can get guys up off the ground, and I got a lot of things I can do. So it's been fun exploring a brand new character and seeing the new stuff that I can do. Otherwise, I'm just like John was saying earlier. I end up playing the same character every time. Play a ranger or whatever. I play the same, and I play the same way every time. But this is giving me an opportunity to try something different. So,
for sure.
So anyway, let's put a lid on this thing. Unless any final thoughts on one shots, adventures, modules, campaigns?
Well, I say that most of what we talk about as modules, that TSR, or not TSR, I'm sorry, Wizards of the Coast. Oh, so many
You're so old.
Yeah. Well, actually, I made the mistake for this reason. All right. So TSR used to publish modules, right? And those modules tend to be fairly short, kind of almost pamphlet length, and they were designed to get you from like 2 levels, maybe. Most of the things that Wizards of the Coast's putting out now, those hardback books, they are designed to go from like level 1 to level 15. And so they are proper full-length campaigns in various forms and guises and stuff. So I don't know that we do modules in a printed form anymore. I'm sure there are third-party ones that are doing it out there, but I don't think Wizards of the Coast does that anymore. And I get it. I guess the profit margin on modules are so much smaller that those hardback books, they can get a lot more out of it. But I remember all the modules you used to see growing up from TSR. And I kind of miss them. I think modules are kind of neat, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I mean even Call of Cthulhu and Traveler have done the same thing. They've got these massive campaigns that are pre-written for you, and you can create characters or use their pre-generated characters. My problem about running published modules, and I've done it plenty of times. I'll take a piece of it, like for instance, part of the first chapter, I like to say, of your Call of Cthulhu adventure was really based on one of the campaigns or one of the scenarios in the rule book. But I totally modified it. The only thing I made the same was really the bad guy and the search in the woods. That's it. I mean, for one thing, I modernized it. I added tons of stuff to it. I added the whole thing with the catacombs. That was all on me. But anyway, going back to I hate running modules because I always forget stuff. First of all, if it's in my mind, I know what's going on. I created this, and I usually create it from the back forward. Like, this is the thing. This is kind of how I want the guys to end up. How are we going to get there? But a module is always chronologically the beginning and the end. And so I invariably always don't read ahead, or I don't understand how this thing's supposed to go. And then I have you guys do all this thing, or it doesn't go exactly in the module. And then I got to read right in the middle of it and like figure out, okay, what do I do right here? A whole paragraph, or, I mix it all up. And,
my problem is I always
terrible running mine.
My problem is I always hit that block where it goes, okay, and it turns out the mummy is alive and actually a lich. Do not read to players. Ah, man.
Yeah. Exactly. That's my exact point.
Forget you knew that.
And that, I mean, so I've actually looked at some of the Call of Cthulhu. There's this massive campaign. Got some Egypt stuff and everything in there, and it looks really cool. And if you buy the like $100 pack, I mean, it's got maps, it's got tons of like printed material. It's like a 3-volume slip set, and I mean, I've looked at it just because I like buy game stuff anyway, but then I'm like, I would never run that just because there's no way I could keep that going. I mean, that's just me though. I mean, I'm maybe for someone that enjoys modules and enjoys doing it that way, that's the way to go. Buy one of these big adventures and get it going, maybe modified or throw in some side quests and stuff. Most of them are designed to be a little open-ended anyway.
I bought a big module set like that for D&D way back when, and I was really into it. It was this whole, it had this whole kind of Egypt pyramids and all sorts of stuff, and there was liches in it and everything else. And I remember, going through the module, I'm like, oh man, this sounds really cool. I'm like, but man, because the thing was, generally at the time, this was, I think, maybe when it was just me, Frank, and Steven playing. I don't know if we'd started playing with Jimmy at all. So it'd been like, man, two characters are going through this, man, they could not do this. I'd have to sit there and play at least, a couple of NPCs probably to sit there and fill out the party, or let them play higher level characters,
Or you can always let your characters have henchmen, if you have
That's
a small
true.
party.
Yeah.
But back on you, Frank. I remember those modules because they were designed to all go back to back. Like there was the giants is what comes to mind. It was G1, 2, and 3. You started out with hill giants, and then I think frost giants, and then fire giants or something like that. And then after that, it was continued on to D1, 2, and 3, where you went under the earth. I mean, all these modules actually could continue on up to a pretty high level that TSR used to put out. I've got some of those.
Yeah, but I mean,
now.
they were individual and they were kind of encapsulated in their own right, and like there was a numbering sequence and stuff, but you would go, oh, that's just a thing. And one of the things I enjoyed about the modules is that it was relatively cheap to get. So, and you could just buy a module and go, oh, I get the gist of it. And, players never do what you're supposed to do in the module anyway, right? So they go do their own thing. So you could just use that as a launching point to kind of go on from there. So I genuinely dug modules, but I never liked running them. But I did like them for, like you did, to pull elements out. That's a really cool idea I never thought of. Let me take that and this piece over here and smush it together and put some linking stuff. And then when Jimmy goes off and does a random thing that I was never expecting, I can pull that into here. That kind of stuff. It was a lot more. It was kind of like Legos in a way. I can make my own set out of multiple sets.
And then one nice thing about a module too, though, is that at least it's there as a whole, and usually they've pre-thought of what if the characters go down this hallway or that hallway, and it's a little bit less burden on the game master to maybe deal with a totally unexpected thing, because usually it's been kind of thought of. And I mean, if they just turn around and go back and say we're not going to play, well then we're going to play something else. But I mean, if you're going into this cavern or this dungeon, then just like we are in Andrew's campaign, I mean, you're expected to just keep moving forward, and so everything's already there, and so a lot of the burden's taken away. But they don't really lend themselves well to my style of game mastering. And for me, the joy of the adventure is creating the ideas and from the onset. It's just what I like to do. That's why I do it. And then to put you guys through it, right? And then we all write the story together. That's me. For me, that's gaming. Not the combat. I mean, the combat and all that stuff's fun, and the tactical stuff, and that's cool, but it's a different way. And I like playing it just fine, but it's not really my thing, as far as a game master.
One of the things I find intriguing about the notion of a campaign is you mentioned 7 Days to Die, and I realized that I like games like that. Those are sandbox games, and one of the reasons I like those so much is because essentially you set your own agenda, right? You go, I've decided this is what I want to do. I'm interested in doing this, and within the rules of the game, the capability of the game, you can do it, and I find that intriguing. The notion of a campaign where I can make a character and I can say his desire is to become a duke. Okay, well then now I campaign with that in mind. It's a long-term goal. Or his desire is to have the most interesting ale house in the land. It allows you to do long-term goals and work towards them in interesting ways, and something you don't get to do in an adventure. There's just not enough of a time frame. And particularly, the types of adventures that, like Traveler, I don't think it lends itself particularly well to that type of long-term goal. Almost always the goal is just not be out of debt and not be near death.
Kind of like real life.
Like real life, yeah.
Yeah. So, but you were talking about your bard character. Why don't you've struggled with that and everything. Why don't you think about that next time we're gaming? and it's not your turn to hit
That-
the monster, why don't you start thinking about what's this guy's long-term goal? What am I going to do after I get out of here? What's my plan?
Yeah, and that's
And
kind
maybe-
of I've been working on that a little bit, and again, the issue here for that particular character is it's not something the way I've personified this character is not the way that I play very well, so I need to change him completely. And
Well, Andrew will help you do that. Trust me.
well, I actually he's almost died twice. He's almost died twice, and I'm okay if he dies. I really am.
Yeah, that's the way I was with my paladin, but I'm kind of digging my cleric. So
Because I have an idea for a character that I really like to play that's totally different. So
Did you hear that, Andrew? Kill the bard.
it's I'm okay.
kill
with
the bard, kill the bard. That sounds like a song right there. See,
Well, and this is where like Steven is so much better at this stuff than I am, because my thought is why would you become a bard? I don't know.
to get chicks.
I mean,
What-
and that's the thing is, okay, if it's to get chicks, all right, well then you need to be personable and charismatic. Well, I'm not, so how do I play somebody who's that way? It's like I don't really.
it's called role playing, man.
I know, but it's not something that again I don't have a lot of. It's a big challenge for me, so to speak. So
Yeah. So, any other final thoughts on this? One shots versus modules campaigns. Any comparison? Any ideas on that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. So Jimmy, as you often do, I think you have some valuable resources for our listeners.
Yeah, I think all of my resources are focused on one shots because for me they're pretty novel and they're an interesting way to break up your regular.
did we
games.
just talk about how they're not a novel? They're like a short story.
But
He's so funny. Yeah, so Geek and Sundry has an article written, and then Matt Mercer did a video where he talks about how to execute a one-shot game and gives some advice on that. So I have links for both of those for this episode on the website. And then also mythcreants.com has so Matt Mercer's and Geek and Sundries is about finding one-shot games that are designed like micro RPGs. Mythcreants has a really good article for how to design a one-shot game using something like Dungeons & Dragons or Traveller. And those are the three resources I think we'll bring up on the individual page for this episode. And I would like to mention just a few things on the one shots. So three games I think that are really would be fun to play because I've played them or look really fun. Everybody is John. It's free. You can go online, type that in, find it. It's one page of rules. It's
a free PDF, and it's like if it'll take you longer to read them than to run it. Almost, it's just
it's
so
really
simple.
Short. Yeah, really short and simple. And then another one is The Witch is Dead. So this is one where again, one page of rules. You play familiars that belong to the witch, little woodland creatures, and then your witch is killed by a witch hunter.
I'm melting.
Yeah. And then it's your job to go and seek retribution for the death of your witch. And you play toad, bat, cat, and everybody has a unique skill based on what they are, and you have to work together. And then the other one is Time Travel Thaw. This one sounds like a blast. So basically you play superheroes and you're going after a villain who has traveled back in time to erase your abilities and who you are, kill you that way. And what you do is you write your superpowers, a list of your superpowers on a paper towel with a Sharpie. And then you put an ice cube on the paper towel. And as it melts, it will erase some of your skills. So as the game goes on, you got to sort of keep it hopping so you have your skills to go combat the villain. Because at the end of the game, if the ice cube has melted all of your skills, you're pretty much done. So that sounds like it'd be a blast to do.
What if you have a freezer that can get to absolute zero?
Seriously?
Would you win the game?
You're such a nerd.
So there's another group of games out there that are similar. One is called Lasers and Feelings, and there's a bunch of games that have like, one word and another, and essentially they're literally one page, and they effectively, you have two stats, and one is whether, in this particular case, if you're better at lasers, which means you're better at technology and science and rational thinking and things like that, or if you're better at feelings, which you're better at intuition, diplomacy, that type of stuff. And the setup behind this particular lasers and feelings is that you're on a interstellar scout ship named Raptor. Your captain is taken over by a psychic being in the med bay, and then you've got there's your adventure. That's it, more or less. And you as a character have a goal, and you're either better at lasers or better at feelings. And that's basically the entire rule set, more or less. And, they would lend themselves well to, one-shots and that sort of thing as well. And there's like dozens of those, blah or blah.
Good place to go and find those is a website called 200 Word RPG Challenge. You go to that website, just type that into Google, you'll find it. And in 200 words or less, people submit every year role-playing games. And you can just go there and check them out. There's all kinds of really interesting ones you can find on there that are a hoot to play.
All right. And with that, I think we'll wrap this thing up. Please remember to rate and review. And we thank you so much for listening. And there'll be some information coming along at the end of the podcast of how to reach out and contact us. And we will see you next week.
Roleplay Geeks out.
That's all we have for this week. Thanks for spending time with us. Please leave a review and comments wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have topic suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can reach us at roleplaygeeks@roleplaygeeks.com. Head on over to the website for an archive of all our previous shows, as well as links to all our social media channels. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next week.